Hello everyone, Frank DeMore here again with the End Times Research Ministry, bringing you my documentary on Bible prophecy and current events called The Last Chronicles of Planet Earth, bringing it to you today for free. You can go over to my website that you see on the drop down there and just click the link under the book and you'll have my book today for free. And I keep this book up to date for you so that you'll have the latest information. Now, for those of you who have been coming to my website, you know that I've been discussing the two wars that haven't been fulfilled yet in Bible prophecy. The first war is the Psalm 83 war, and of course the nations are targeting Israel, as you can see in the news, for this up-and-coming war, the Psalm 83 war. If you're new to my website and you don't know anything about this prophecy, just let it be known that God in the Old Testament showed us that Israel was going to be attacked. They were going to be attacked and outnumbered quite a bit in the last days. We are told exactly who those nations are that are going to attack Israel, and you can see every one of those nations named in this picture. And so let me just center on a couple of the people here. First of all, Israel is going to be attacked, so Israel has to be mentioned. But as you're looking at this photo, I just want to make sure that you understand Philistina is the Old Testament name, but they are the modern day Palestinians. And you'll notice in the news there's a lot going on in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank concerning the Palestinians. And of course, there's going to be these other nations, Jordanians, the Lebanese, the Sinai, which is Egypt, and Saudi Arabia and so forth, Syria. Hezbollah has been in the news lately, calling for the destruction of the nation of Israel. So we know there is definitely a war that's coming. We also know that the second war that will be fought after this war has to do with the Ezekiel 38 war. This war will be dealing with nations that do not surround the nation of Israel right to the borders. These are the nations that are in the outskirts, past the bordering nations, and you see them all numbered there. And on this left-hand side, you'll see who they are. Turkey, which is modern day name for Beth Tagarma. And then you have Iran, which in the Old Testament is Persia. You'll have Afghanistan, which was also part of Persia, Ethiopia, and Sudan. They were one. They were Cush. Now Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco were one, and they were called Put. And Germany, Gomar. Armenia, Beth Tagarma. And of course, the scriptures do tell us that many nations with you, Russia, no doubt, is going to be playing a part in that as well as we look out and see what they're doing as far as Bible prophecy and current events. So in the map, you'll see the direction. The Bible tells us that they will be coming for the northern quarters. And you'll see Turkey is directly north of Israel, and all these other countries will be coming in. So we do know that there is going to be millions upon millions of people. I can't tell you exactly how many, but there are going to be a substantial number of armies that will be coming against Israel, thinking that they're going to destroy the nation of Israel. And of course, we have a whole different perspective when you read Ezekiel 38 and 39 of the outcome of that war, because in that war, God will step in and he defeats the enemies that are coming against Israel. They never even make it into Israel. God steps in and he wipes them out in the mountains of Israel. And so there are going to be, as I said, millions upon millions of people trying to take out the nation of Israel. Now, do we see any signs of people calling on such a great number of nations to wipe out Israel? You better believe it. Let's take a look at it. Well, I want to bring you back, first of all, to something that happened in history, November the 17th of 1979. This article that I'm going to be showing you came from the LA Times. And the headline reads, Iranian leader urges march on Holy Land. In other words, a march on Israel. Now, back then, they were talking about a massive army coming together. Take a look at this article, if you will, and they're talking about the march on Jerusalem. I'll blow it up for you so you can see it better. It says, an Iranian leader has called on other Muslim nations to help build an army of 50, 60, or 70 million to march on Israeli-held Jerusalem. If Iran succeeds in its drive to topple the regime of Iraqi President Saddam Hussein. So back then, they were having problems between Iraq and Iran, and they were fighting with each other. Chemical weapons were used. But here's the bottom line. The leader, the spiritual leader of Iran, said that they wanted, as soon as Iraq was taken out of the way, that they wanted to go in after Israel and bring an exorbitant number of Muslims against Israel. 70 million. 50, 60, or 70 million of men going into Israel. That is a lot of people. And that's why I believe with all my heart when Ezekiel wrote to us and said that it was going to be as a cloud covering the land. That's massive numbers. And later on in this article, they repeated again, march on Jerusalem after the defeat of Hassan. So what we have here is, take a look at history. We know that Desert Storm, President Bush sends his people in, Iraq is taken out of the way. Now over the course of years, things have happened that we couldn't calculate. But we're seeing the outcome of it. So at that time in 1979, we saw that Iran, who is very influential now and has deployed people in just about every one of those bordering nations around Israel, and they still want to defeat Israel. They're calling for the destruction of Israel today. And now that Iraq is pushed out of the way, we see the verbiage again. So it's being repeated again. Let me show you what I'm talking about. In the Al Jazeera News, notice the headline, Islamic movement threatens all-out religious war. This article came out on October the 12th of 2015, and this is what it says. The northern branch of the Islamic movement in Israel made more threats against Israel on Monday, defying a promise from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to blacklist the group and ignoring several major Israeli political statements. You should know that Netanyahu is leading you into a religious war. Sheikh Kamil Khatib, deputy head of the movement, stated to Walla News, Israeli Jews, your numbers consist of 8 million, but you will stand in this war against, get the number here, 13 million Palestinians, not just against hundreds of millions of Arabs, but all 1.6 billion Muslims worldwide. So there you have it. They're calling for 1.6 billion Muslims worldwide to get together to go after Israel. Now this movement that they're talking about is not going to be the Psalm 83 war. There's going to be a large number that will come after Israel during the Psalm 83 war, but the numbers that we see that the Muslims are calling for in this article, that won't happen until this war, the Ezekiel War, when we see that after the Psalm 83 war and the world sees Israel win that war, what's going to happen is Muslims are going to be infuriated. They're going to see their Arab brothers, Muslims, destroyed by the Israelis. And all this is going to do is mount up even more pressure like a volcano ready to explode, to the point where the Ezekiel War will come into fruition, and then you will see, who knows, 60, 70, maybe 80 million Muslims pouring down on the nation of Israel. We know that Ezekiel talks about there's so many that it's going to look like a cloud covering the land. That's how many people are going to be coming against Israel. But you have to understand that the Lord revealed to us that 5/6 of the invading armies that come down against Israel are going to be killed. So in the news, it's going to be a miracle defeat of its enemy. Israel's going to see God step in and do this miracle, destroying the enemies who goes after and tries to wipe out the nation of Israel. But here we have the prelude to the wars, calling 13 million Palestinians, but all. Now, I want you to understand something as well. Zechariah, the prophet, in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 3, what did he tell us? He told us that Jerusalem would be a burdensome stone, but he also told us in those scriptures that everyone was going to be coming against Israel in the last days. So when you look at the number of 1.6 billion Muslims, it's not too far-fetched, because we see that in the scriptures. There's going to be countless numbers coming after Israel. And when the world sees, I'm hoping and I'm praying that when the world sees that no one can squash Israel, and God has its hand on Israel for his own purposes and to sanctify his name, then you understand that an army like this is being formed right now to fulfill this future prophecy. Now, another important note that I wanted to point out here, it goes on to say, Khatib also insisted that Israel is attempting to change the status quo on the Temple Mount, which Muslims claim is a holy site for them and which has been the holiest site in Judaism for thousands of years. We have always said that Israel was digging under the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and it has become clear to everyone that we were right, he said. So the reason why I'm giving you this part is because I've been warning you to keep your eyes in East Jerusalem, because the Temple Mount area is the area that, in my opinion, based on what I know from Zechariah, that this is going to be the igniter, if you will, for the next war. Ownership of this area. And again, in the news today, we see that there's more problems, more killings, and they're going to shut down roads going into East Jerusalem. So there's no question that there is definitely a burdensome stone for East Jerusalem. And that prophecy is being fulfilled right before our eyes. Now take a look at the JewishPress.com. This is October the 13th. Jerusalem on lockdown, prepares to defend against terror. Neighborhoods in eastern Jerusalem were placed on full lockdown following a chain of mass casualty terror attacks Tuesday morning. All roads leading into Jerusalem were closed effective at 11 a.m. until further notice. The security measures came in response to a set of at least 3 nearly substantial Arab terrorist attacks that left more than 17 civilians wounded. At least 5 are in critical condition and half a dozen more are seriously wounded. Dozens more are badly traumatized after the attacks, which took place on bus number 78 and in the 2 locations in the very heart of the city, Melchi Israel Street. So it's definitely ranching up the tensions there in East Jerusalem. And keep in mind, the reason why we have so much terror attacks right now, this round, is because of what was taking place on the Temple Mount. That Temple Mount area is very, very explosive. And that's why I keep telling people, please watch the news, center on what's going on in Israel, and then really focus in on the Temple Mount in East Jerusalem. There's going to be war. We know that the war is coming. We know that it is the Psalm 83 war. And for those who just found my website and don't know the difference between the Psalm war and the Ezekiel war, there is one major difference that you need to understand. I believe with all my heart that this war, the Psalm 83 war, is going to be fought because of the conflict on the Temple Mount. And when this war is over and Israel wins this war, and I keep saying that Israel will probably take a hit, but they are definitely going to win the war, that the end result will be that Israel will have the full access to go up to their Temple Mount and pray. And no doubt even be allowed to rebuild their temple again, which is part of prophecy. Now, earlier today I made my first video. And after I made that video, I took off for a while and came back, and I noticed that there was more upheaval in Israel. It's really ratcheting up. And the BBC News covered just an hour ago, the headline reads, 3 Israelis killed in Jerusalem attacks. Now in my first video that I incorporated now into this video, that I showed the war was coming. I showed you what war was going to be, the Psalm 83 war, and I showed you why that war was going to take place. And I told you that it was going to be mainly over the holy site at the Temple Mount. And on the Temple Mount is the third most holy site for the Muslims. And the Muslims see this as a crucial area that they cannot allow Israel to control at all. And so over the past few months especially, the tensions have been mounting up, as I've talked about quite a bit in this past week. So now let me just play this news clip, because what I've been warning you, the BBC News is really saying exactly what I've been warning. So listen to this.
Currently scenes like this taking place across the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Here in Bethlehem, there have recently been clashes every single day, and it's taken on a familiar pattern. The Palestinian protesters come down the street, they've been throwing stones, and the Israeli soldiers go out firing tear gas and rubber bullets. I've been speaking to one Palestinian protester about why the violence has been escalating.
It's because of the invasion of our Al-Aqsa Mosque and disrespecting the Palestinian holy sites.
So there you have it, right there. I'm going to stop it for a second. They'll even show you a picture there with the Dome of the Rock. So the reason why all this is taking place right now, the rioting, is over that holy site. Exactly what I've been telling you.
This is a red line and we won't allow it. All our lives we've been dealing with Israeli occupation as a political struggle. But now they're fighting our religion. There is pressure on people's lives, on our economy already. This wall is a symbol of racism. There are also incursions of our city every day. Arrests, people being taken to prison, and martyrs. This all puts pressure on a Palestinian man. Until now, this is not a full uprising, but God willing, it will be soon.
So I hope you got that, because it said, God willing, it will be soon. And I've been telling you over and over again, it is coming. That war, the Psalm 83 war, and the Palestinians are going to be in the heart of that battle. That's what we see in Psalm 83.
Is anyone from the political leadership telling you to go out on the streets?
In my opinion, politics doesn't interfere in what we are doing. All incidents, whether they are stabbings or shootings, are personal decisions, not decisions by politicians. What you see on Facebook, sometimes it pushes young Palestinians forwards and shows us what's happening in all of Palestine. When people post things, they are not trying to order people what to do.
So what's happening on the streets isn't yet organised in any meaningful way. There's no clear and unified goal. But many of these young Palestinians don't respect their leaders. They're a generation that's grown up with the failure of peace talks to deliver an independent Palestinian state. And there are feelings of anger and humiliation. And for all of those reasons, it's very hard to predict what happens next and whether those who are trying to bring this situation under control really can do so.
So I'm going to stop it right there and go to another prophecy where Paul wrote to us and said that when they shall call peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come. Well, guess what? They're calling for the peace and safety, and all we see is more insursions, more riots, more killings. And it is definitely the road that's leading to the next war and the fulfillment of the wars that were prophesied. Now, in order for Israel to see this second war come against them as prophesied by their own prophet Ezekiel, there has to be a condition of Israel living in peace, because we're told in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, when you read that, that attack is going to take place when Israel has no bars, no gates, or no walls, and they're dwelling safely. So we know that that's not the case right now in Israel, but when the Psalm 83 war is over, they take more land, they feel safe enough to bring down their walls, the bars, and the gates, and then boom, there you have it. Ezekiel War steps in, and that prophecy will be fulfilled too. So the bottom line is this: get ready for the two wars. Get ready to see Israel's walls, bars, and gates coming down, and then get ready for the Ezekiel War. And as it says in this news article, where they're looking at 1.6 billion Muslims, you're going to see a lot of Muslims coming down on Israel, just like in this map that the Lord has given to us in chapters 38 and 39 of the book of Ezekiel, where he outlines every one of the nations that are going to be coming against Israel. So what I'm giving you essentially is a look at the future before the future happens. And it's not me really giving it to you. I'm just showing you what God has shown us in his word in the Bible. And you can count on everything that he says to come to fruition 100%. All the prophecies are coming to pass right now, and this is the first time in history that all of the signs that the Lord Jesus Christ told us to look for is happening in one single generation. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the Assyrians, because we were talking about Syria as one of the nations in the Psalm 83 war, and Syria is in the mix right now of, or I should say, on the road to fulfilling Isaiah chapter 17 verse 1, where Damascus is going to be left in a ruinous heap. And we're seeing millions of Syrians leaving Syria because they are being inundated by ISIS, killed by ISIS. And so again, the road being paved for the future prophecy to be fulfilled. And let's keep in mind what Jesus told us in Matthew 24:9, because this prophecy, just in the last 3 or 4 years, has really started to get a lot worse than it used to be. And the Lord warned us that then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. So the Lord revealed to us that we were going to have Christian persecution in the last days. And that's what's happening, especially as ISIS has formed and they started to migrate into the countries that they're trying to make a new caliphate again. And so we're seeing our brothers and our sisters murdered, brutally murdered. So let's take a look at the report today. And this comes from CP World. It says ISIS to execute 180 Syrian Christians after negotiations break down. It says the Syrians hold banners as they march in solidarity with Syrians abducted by the Islamic State fighters in Syria earlier this week in Beirut, Lebanon, February 28th of 2015. The militants in northeast Syria are now estimated to have abducted at least 220 Assyrian Christians this week, a group monitoring the war report. The banner R reads, "We are not afraid of whom kills the flesh. We are not afraid of whom destroys the stone. Assyrians and victorious." So let me just give you the gist of this article. ISIS, this brutal group of barbarians who have infiltrated into Syria trying to destroy Bashar al-Assad's government, they are taking Christians and even Muslims who are not going to follow completely the way ISIS wants them to follow. In other words, Sharia law and everything that involves around that. So we're seeing millions, as I stated, of Christians and even Muslims leaving Syria. And we're also seeing massive persecution. In another case that we're seeing here, 220 people, and it all involves money. The ISIS fighters are demanding an exorbitant amount of money, and it's just extortion. So only God knows what's going to happen, but if they can't come up with the money, in the past they have beheaded anybody that they have captured and doesn't follow their ways. So we're praying for the release of these Christians and the release of the Muslims who were captured by ISIS. So pray that the Lord steps in for these people who were abducted. And I know that for some of you it's hard to pray for ISIS, but the Lord told us in His Word that we should be praying for our enemy. And so let's pray collectively as a church, of those that love our Lord Jesus Christ and those that listen to the Word, where Paul told us to pray without ceasing. And part of that praying has to do with praying for people that hate you, your enemies. So let's be diligent in following the word of the Lord and pray that ISIS comes to terms that Jesus Christ is in fact the Messiah and that He is in full control of whatever happens in Syria and in every other place as well. And so in closing, let me just give you Hosea chapter 4 verse 3 once again. The warning about the birds, the fish, and the animals dying off in mass numbers, obviously, because the Lord showed us that in the last days they were going to be taken away. Now, I've been watching the news for the last couple of days, and it was relatively quiet, but something did come up in the news today that I want to share with you. And this news comes from Peru, October the 10th of 2015, which I haven't reported on. And you'll see the turtles and sea lions found dead in Hermosa Beach. So we have now 11 adult sea lions and 2 turtles that were discovered dead. And when you take a look at the article, if you go read these articles, you'll see why they're dying. In this case, they believe that it was poison that killed them off. And we know that there are a lot of things in the water that can poison these sea creatures, and one of those are the different tides, the blooms that are being forming that I reported on. One such tide would be the red tide that looks like the water becomes blood-like, and then there's the brown tide. And so let's keep our eyes again on the news, because we're going to see more of the same, especially as I reported on this week. El Nino is getting stronger. It is a super El Nino, and the waters are going to get a little bit warmer than they are right now, and it's going to cause a lot of the sea life to die off.